Hey guys, in my last video I took you through the critic. It's how your brain is talking to you and how the way in which you talk to yourself can hold you back. Today I want to talk about a different thing that can hold you back, also to do with inner game, also to do with removing barriers. And before I explain kind of exactly how this works, I need to explain a little bit about how your brain is wired and your neurology. And every single person has the neocortex, the thinking rational part of the brain, the communication part, the bit that allows me to speak to you now. And then we have our older, more limbic system brain, which is the root of our emotions. Now when we see things in our day-to-day life, they get sorted by the thalamus. The thalamus is like the brain switchboard. It decides where to send the signals. Now, when you're doing things that make complete sense to you, your laptop, whatever, things get pushed to your neocortex, you start manipulating things, using them, talking to people, whatever it is. When you see something that's considered a threat, however, the thalamus passes the signal to the amygdala. Now your amygdala controls threat response, and it controls specifically what to do when it sees something that should create a fight or flight response, for lack of a better expression, in you. The amygdala in turn passes this to the PAG, the para-aqueductal gray. Now, there are 4 different reactions when it gets to that you can have to something that you perceive as scary. You can have the flight response, the fight response, the shutdown response, or a predatory response. This is something we see a lot in pickup. When you see, let's say you see a set and you're told to go approach it, and you're not very good with women, or you're not kind of in that mindset of being able to handle women, then the signal can go to your amygdala, and your amygdala releases one of these for examples. Just to give you an idea of what that means is, with most common we see is flight. We see guys that they see a set and they panic, and their body's telling them, oh, get away from that girl. Because evolutionarily speaking, that girl could create problems for them, in our Stone Age brain. It could be that if he talks to the wrong girl, other guards will beat him up, or he'll be ostracized from the society. That's why we say approach anxiety is hardwired. There's actually research that suggests that women have a similar hardwired fear of group rejection too, but in groups of other women, and they have more social anxiety around those kind of groups, especially when they're teenagers. So it's not just us. Anyway, so you get this flight response, then obviously you go into the set and you instantly forget what it was you were going to say. Your mind goes blank, you're a little shaky, and your body telling you run, run, run. It's an example of the flight response, when it goes there. We also see guys that in the community, usually before or after the community, if they're not successful, you see guys that have like an anger response to women. That's the fight response. You see guys that start to hate on women because they perceive them to have power over men, that that they are almost jealous of, they get to just walk around in bikinis and get all the sex they want, all women are sluts. And guys get really angry at women without realizing that women have just as hard a time on the relationship front, because all these guys want to have sex with these women, but a lot of them don't want to commit at all. This is a very interesting thing that we see, where the guys that go into the fight response, they get really annoyed at the women, but then they view themselves as the victims. And they'll be like, I'm the victim because I'm not good looking enough, I'm not rich enough, I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. You get that kind of thing with the fight response when, it comes to women and getting angry. If you have a really severe fight response, by the way, with women, you get really angry about them, that's a good sign that you should probably seek some kind of therapy to get to the root of any issues you might be having with women. It's luckily very rare you see that, but it can happen. The shutdown response we tend to see a lot with rejection. We tend to see guys who maybe they push too far out of their comfort zone in one night, and they get rejected by a lot of sets, so they just shut down. You see it after a big breakup, a divorce, or a long-term relationship that crumbles. You see guys literally shut down. That's another response to an external threat to do with women. And when that happens, typically people recover sometimes in a couple of months, sometimes in a couple of days, sometimes the next day if it's just, you pushed outside your comfort zone in that particular night. But being aware of where your comfort zones are going to be is a very important part of avoiding a shutdown response to stimuli. Finally is the predatory response, and this is where you kind of stop seeing, you start to try and take control of the interaction by dominating it, by going out there and trying to claim it. You see a lot of guys in pickup who are social robots have this response. They're like, oh, I must go out there and learn how to control it and deal with it. And it's not an ideal response, simply because although it seems like it doesn't have the drawbacks of, like, saying getting angry with women or wanting to run away from them or being inert to them, not being able to emotionally process anymore. The problem is when you're in the predatory mindset, women don't really seem real. You'll try and get a lot of notches on your bed, and women will start to pick up that you're not being, genuine with them. So these are your 4 responses. These are the things that can happen to you based on women and particular interactions you have with them. It's probably interesting if you think back to your reactions. I know I've definitely gone through moments of shutdown when where I was learning this stuff and I got a lot of rejections, or I pushed way further than I thought I was way further than I was able to. I've gone through flight a lot, moments where I just I couldn't think of what to say. I've also been a little bit predatory at times when I think about it in the past, in terms of like, must go out and do this. Going through different responses is normal. Your threat response can evolve over time as you get better. What you're looking to do, though, is by understanding this response, you're also able to in some way control it. And the main way you can control this is if you remove the attention away from your threat response and back to your neocortex, you can start to reassert your conscious brain into that. You can start to take control. You can effectively start to remove that emotional, knee-jerk response. Now, that is very difficult, and the simple reason for that is, again, the neocortex is new, which means that the neocortex to the thalamus, that's the switchboard, that's kind of like a surface street connection. The thalamus to your amygdala, that's like a superhighway. It is much, much faster. So in order to take control, there are a few things that you want to do. The first one is structured game. By running structured game and labeling everything, you start to objectively view the interactions you're having, and you start to put control back into your neocortex, because you're now rationally labeling it. This is an IOI, this is an IOD, this is a shit test, this is her qualifying me, this is me qualifying her, this is an interrupt. And by labeling the parts, you start to remove this fear and you start to focus on the mechanical viewpoints. And this, we find, is, because we're a very structured game company, this is very, very potent when it comes to removing that initial anxiety. When guys do this, their inner game issues tend to go away for a while until they start to get better. And then when they get to the end point where they are sleeping with women, that's when new inner game issues surface that are completely different from the traditional threat response based around, I'm new to pickup in women. Another really important thing is to go out there and get exposure. We all know that when we first go into a loud nightclub, all the different things happening, the music, the lights, the alcohol, the crowds, these things all take attention away from us, and we can't focus on any one thing because our brains are telling us, and creating another threat response. So getting into these situations, and at first just getting used to the exposure of them to start to hone us into being able to deal with that response, but then later using those same stimuli to reassert our own responses. And what I mean by that is, at first when you go to a nightclub, the music just means, I'm in a club, but as you get better and you get more positive responses from women, that same stimuli will put you in state. You'll be like, oh, this is my club, this is my song, yeah, and you'll start to remember or anchor specific stimuli, such as, clubs and environments with success you've had. So one of the ways you can do this is if you go out to the same place, and when you start out, I recommend you go out to the same place a few times. When you go out to the same place and you start building positive associations in that place, you're going to very instantly start to be like, okay, this is my place, I feel very at home here. And that, coupled with the structuralization of I know my structure, so I'm my neocortex is in control, and I know that this is my home and I'm comfortable with this creates this very powerful feeling in that venue. Eventually, we're going to want to expand that out to a wide variety, and in fact, expand that into every area of your life. But when you start out, just getting down that one specific venue is going to be really key. Now, finally, a really useful thing is going out with instructors or wings. Because what happens is when you get into that emotional mental state, you're aware that if you don't open or do something to break yourself out of it fairly quickly, you're going to keep going down, down, down until you can't open. And generally, if we have that on a boot camp with a guy, it's been 30 minutes and he's still like not opening, then we're going to take it to a new venue, because we know at that point opening has become such a Herculean task in his mind in that venue that he needs to change his environment. Consequently, though, when you're out with someone like an instructor or a wing, they can point out to you objectively what happens. They can actually say, hey, this situation you're like freaking out about isn't as bad as you think it is. The first time I realized this was actually, I went out to get filmed several years ago for the first time, and I went to the bar with this camera guy. And we went in there, and I just suddenly, all the sets seemed menacing and terrifying, and I didn't get many approaches done, and we went home, and I decided to look through the footage. I decided, let's see what I could have done better, and let's see how bad it really was. And when I looked at the bar, away from the actual stimuli being in the bar, I could suddenly see, well, there was nothing scary in there. There were these really hot girls, everyone was friendly, everyone was having fun, but my emotions had taken control, that amygdala response had kicked in. By being able to see it away from there, I was able to understand it. And having that perspective, even if it's a friend giving it to you, a wing giving it to you, by going, hey man, this isn't as bad as you think it is, hey, this is just that, this is just that. It's what we do at boot camps to let you know, oh man, don't worry about like that was just a shit test. Next time you get that, just handle it like this. You see, we're relabeling it away from the emotional, and we're restructuralizing it, and that can really help. If you have the wing who approaches, he doesn't just sit there and instruct, but he approaches, pulls you into set, and also you and him can help debunk how your emotions are making you feel and start to see it in a more, I'm going to say, neocortex-y kind of way. That's going to be really, really useful. So the bottom line is, when you go into these clubs, you could have one of these 4 responses as a response to a threat. It can take over and emotionally make you feel this way very quickly. There's not much you can do. But by structuralizing what you're seeing and putting it into a system, by getting into exposure therapy and kind of being in that situation enough to create new associations, and by having other people who can help you reframe and relabel what you're seeing, you'll be able to put control away from that threat response that makes you all shaky and nervous and put it back into your conscious mind. And when you do that, you're going to find you become much, much more successful.